The session recordings for HoldCoConf 2022 are brought to you by Axial. Axial is a lower middle market deal sourcing platform. To learn more and to start accessing new deal flow today, head to axial.net.
Justin, Josh, thanks for getting on stage with me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. If you could each start and give us a minute or 2 minutes, just explain what the company does and what each of you do inside that company. That way we can just everyone can get on the same page here.
You travel the farthest. I'll let you go first.
All right, thanks. So yeah, I'm partners with Reg Zeller, who most of you know, and we run a company called Canecast, and that's kind of our foray, our pinpoint into domestic manufacturing for a lot of the reasons that you just heard. We're also bullish on the sector. And what I do, so Reg does a lot of acquisition work. He knows a lot of the different businesses in manufacturing. He did it from a large perspective, GE, Rockwell, all those companies. And I did it from a small perspective. I supported aerospace medical device companies for a number of years by managing their supply chains with a small business in upstate New York. And so I love ops, and that's basically what I do is he does the acquisitions, he tosses them over the wall, and then I run them, grow them. So the way that we like to think about it is I'm organic growth and he's inorganic growth.
Yeah, so I'm Justin. If you didn't know Kelsey, you just met him a minute ago. And so I am the integrator side to him being the visionary. We run the business on an EOS model. If you guys aren't familiar with that, you'll hear about it later, I'm sure. And very similar to Josh, Kelsey is the big idea guy. He's let me bring you 20 ideas every week, and hopefully 2 of them are pretty good. And then can you please organize the team to execute that idea and try to make it profitable so that we can continue to grow. And so we do that in the e-commerce space with 6 different direct-to-consumer brands, primarily using our own media, our own websites, things like that.
Yeah, 2 very different businesses. And I'm sure we're going to find out here in the next couple of minutes how similar all of our problems are. All right, so one of the things I wanted to tackle here on stage, mainly selfishly, is help everyone in the room, because again, we have a lot of CEOs, a lot of founders out there. What does a CEO or founder need to know on how to best work with their COO, president, or operator? Walk us through that relationship.
So I think the answer to that answers a lot of other questions too, of what do you look for, what type of relationship should you have. I think one of the most important things is to be able to dive in and then get out. If you truly are hiring somebody that you trust, that you want to run your business, you need to let them run the business, and there will not always be times that you agree. That's totally okay. I think you need to let the egos down, and both sides, right? The CEO needs to say, "Hey, I'm going to come in and I'm going to break stuff, and then I'm going to leave. And when you rebuild it and fix it, it's going to be better." And on the flip side, I need to understand that we need somebody to come in and break stuff. And so an example of this, I'm talking high level, but an example of this for us in manufacturing would be, I'm working on optimizing the floor. I'm working on optimizing, we call it mold count. That's our big number. I'm optimizing mold count. And I'm like, hey, we're up 20%, 30%, we're crushing it. And Reg comes in and he says, it should be double. And he's like, because you're not thinking about these 3 things. And then he leaves. He just broke the ceiling, right? He just basically said what I'm doing is undershooting. And then he left. I wasn't big enough to see that I was undershooting. I was just like, oh, I'm optimizing, I'm growing. So I think having that person, appreciating that person, and then from the CEO side, appreciating that you can give a big idea and leave and let somebody else implement and back out of it, I think is really the key trait that makes it work.
Yeah, trust is the biggest word, and I think one of the things that I kind of it runs the same parallel as a marriage, right? So whether you're an equity partner or you're just the person who's come in to be the person operating the business, it is a marriage. And much like when you go home and you have to deal with your spouse, being able to do that from a place of understanding at all times, because the person who's on that CEO side oftentimes will have big pictures and they'll want to do a lot of things. And they need to be able to move the business forward in a way that they feel like we are moving the business forward at a pace that is acceptable, but also understanding that there are tons of internal, external pressures around that business So when can they back that down? When is that okay? And when is that person going fast enough? And that really only comes through having just an incredible amount of trust that the other person is doing the right thing at all times.
Yeah, those were great answers. I love that. When we first sat down, I think you were explaining, Justin, you were sort of describing what you did, and you were talking about the planning stage, and Kelsey might bring a portion of it, and then it's up to you to execute. We talked about that in preparation for this talk. What does planning look like from an operations perspective? For me, I just usually walk in and say, hey, I'd like to go over there. And then Brandon says, you can't just do that. And I said, I think we can.
So we may be a little bit unique, and Josh and I might have different ways that we've gone about this. So we have an awesome leadership team, and we have taken kind of our entire business. We've got these 6 brands, and we look at them each as a profit center. And then we really only have one business, and we have one leadership team and one group of employees and one workforce that basically runs all of those businesses. And so oftentimes working with Kelsey is that we call it kind of throwing a grenade over the wall, right? So if you're familiar with the process of quarterly planning, oftentimes you try to set plans for 90 days. There's a lot of people wearing these cute little t-shirts that we decided to get last week in the room, and many of them, if you ask them, would tell you that it's very rare that the things that we execute in a 90-day window are the things that we agreed to execute in the 90-day window 90 days prior. And that's often because things are coming at you so fast in this kind of small market business where you're constantly trying to grow, but you don't know what the next thing is that's coming. And so having to be nimble as the kind of bridge between Kelsey and my sense and the team is all about what is the next right thing to do as opposed to just always doing whatever the next thing is.
Yeah, I mean, the way we look at it is very similar. Reg and I talk maybe once a month, big picture. What do we want to build 20 years from now? And that is slowly changing, but it stays roughly the same. We have that down on paper. We know where we want to go. And it's this dichotomy between here's where I want to go in 20 years. I know that for sure, but also not planning the next step because you need to make the next right move. And that is changing dynamically day to day. It might be a new hire. It might be a new acquisition. It might be, for us, switching out a sand system. I mean, and if we were in foundries, stuff's breaking, people are quitting. Like it's the most chaotic environment that I've ever been in. Nothing is dependable. Literally, the facility, the equipment, the labor, the customers, nothing is dependable. And you're literally in one of the harshest environments. Easy. What? Sounds easy. Yeah, it's. I mean, and then you got Reg, who is adding more chaos on top. So, yeah, we know where we want to go. We know exactly what we want to build. We know the service companies that we want to own. We know the systems we want to implement. But to do it all now would break it. It would stress people out. So it's like a reassessment every week of, okay, this week it's these 3 things. At the end of the week, you do 2 of them. One of them gets deprioritized, and then you're rethinking it.
You started that off with Reg and I talk once a month, big picture. How intentional are you two about how and when and what you communicate with your co-partner?
Yeah, so my first conversation with Reg, DMs, and he said, let's talk. And I said, okay, I hate meetings. I hate official times. I go, here's my number. Give me your number. And when we end up talking, let's talk. And he goes, oh, we're going to get along. And that's pretty much how it's always been. We are very non-official about it. We talk constantly. It's never a set time. If I'm excited, pissed, or made a mistake, or just figured out something new, I'll call him. And likewise, when he gets a new lead, does something exciting, realized he was thinking about something wrong, it's an immediate phone call. And that always leads to, a 1-hour session from which I go back and, oh man, I'm going to implement this and adjust this and put this in the plan, or at least write this down so we don't forget. So yeah, it's very informal, but it's constant, to the point where I would say Reg has become a very good friend of mine. I mean, obviously we're talking so much, but we've become very close friends, and we're just sharing everything now all the time and having a good time doing it.
Yeah, I would say we're very similar in the sense that we've always had this cadence of we meet every week for an hour, and it's basically how we start our week. But I think the biggest difference between a small business trying to become a big business and just big businesses is, to Josh's point, every time there's a new idea, a new fire, something that is incredibly exciting, like you just go and you immediately have that conversation and you take action against it, which is what creates the chaos and drives everyone crazy. But it's also the difference between the large organization where it's like, okay, we'll schedule that for a meeting next quarter. We'll talk about it at that point. It's like, no, it's immediate. Like there's something really fun, there's something really exciting, or something really terrifying. Like let's go tackle it now.
Yeah, and I mean, to that point, literally this weekend, I was thinking about something wrong. I realized I had made, I think, some mistakes and some decisions that I've made over the last few 2 or 3 months, and was framing some decisions wrong. And immediately when I realized it over the weekend, I was just kind of on a run and I was thinking about it. I immediately texted Reg. I said, "Hey, Reg, like, I think I'm thinking about this wrong, whatever." There was a 2-hour conversation right there, re-strategizing, figuring out next steps, made some new moves. And then by that night, I had emails out to the whole plant team. And that fast iteration cycle, I think, is key to have, especially, I mean, a lot of us are, if we're buying businesses, they're smaller, we're competing with much larger businesses. Speed is a major asset when you're a small business.
Yeah, I mean, that is like the key differentiator, and like the ability to do that and then take that as the person operating the business and push it down to the next level of your leadership team and be able to continue to do that quick iteration is what allows you to stay ahead of the curve.
I had a number of wonderful conversations last night with so many of you at dinner. And during probably half of those conversations, the topic of who's going to actually do it came up. So we are all looking at you with, hunger in our eyes of how do we find wonderful operators like you guys? Like, from you're sitting in the seat, what do you think we need to be looking for?
There is, I'm going to put a drop in here for Tim Ludwig's community. He has a community that you guys all should join called EBIT Dish. And we just actually covered this, what makes a great partnership, what to look for. And I spent a good part of my Saturday night kind of writing out a reply there. But what it comes down to is, so just like me as an operator, I'm like, hey, everybody must want equity and upside and incentive. And then you start to run businesses and you realize, no, some people just want a salary and to come in and to leave. And so you're offering something that they don't really want and they need something different. You got to realize that as a CEO. Some people want to be doing the day-to-day, want to be there every day. Reg and I joke, and for those of you that know Reg and I, you'll know that we are exactly aligned on running the business and exactly opposite on running our lives. And so Reg wants to be, like, he thinks better when he's out living his life, when he's out with friends, when he's golfing, traveling. And there's a huge dichotomy. It's not that I can't do that. I don't want to do that. I'm doing what I want to do every day. And so when you realize, okay, there's people out there that don't want to be thinking high level and going out. They actually want to be going in every day. Problem solving is where they get their high. This is what they want to do. You got to find the problem solvers. They're curious. They're trustworthy, and they know how to both zoom in and zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. And I think those are the things you need to look for, is realizing that it exists, and then just conversations.
Yeah, I mean, everything Josh said is who I'd look for. I think the other piece to it that I think about is like this person, going back to that marriage thought, like you're gonna spend a lot of time with them, right? And they're gonna live in the clouds in a place where the rest of your team might look at him and be like, what the hell's that person doing, right? Like I can guarantee there's a lot of people that are sitting in our office right now that are like, what's Kelsey been doing for the last 6 months? And why are they at a conference in Cleveland? And how does that have any effect that's going to improve my life? And so understanding that that person is going to be someone that you're going to have to spend a lot of time with, you're going to have to get along. To Josh's point, I don't know that Kelsey and I are like world-class friends and hang out every weekend, but like you have to really enjoy that person. You have to be able to invest in them personally beyond just the professional level of getting things done on a day-to-day basis. And you have to you have to be able to trust them almost out of the gate. If it starts from a place of it's constant second guessing and you're not sure if they should be tinkering in that thing, and you don't give them that kind of freedom to go and look at every different thing that you've done and you've built and kind of twist it and turn it and look at it different ways in the light, it's going to be a difficult road to get to a place where they can accomplish what you want them to accomplish, because at that point you really just want them to do what you did. And at the end of the day, if you really live in that place where you are that visionary entrepreneur, that person who can see what we're doing 10 years from now as opposed to just trying to get through the next 90 or 365 days, odds are there's a lot of things that can be done to improve your life and the life of all of the people that work for you in the short term with the right person.
You guys both run pretty sizable organizations. And when I think of sort of the ops structure of the company, it's this pyramid with you folks at top, but then you have this team of, it could be sub operators or however you think about it. Are those are those the traits that you guys look for in your next level down? Is that how you're finding your own operators?
No. Because too many people like me will, I think, ruin it. You'll end up with this infighting almost. I think there's culture index in the room, I think, and that has been a huge help for us to understanding. So we started because we have this plant manager that is great, and we have a plant manager that is not great, and we wanted to hire more of the good one, but didn't know why he was good exactly. And 30 minutes with culture index and understood exactly why he was good, what we're looking for, how to test for it, find it, and screen for it. And those traits are not my traits. If somebody who is in a plant is zooming out too much, you're going to have a lot of ideas and not much execution. And the way that we set up our opcos is that the plant itself is production. We suck everything out of there into shared services, and we have a shared services model which supports the plant, everything from order entry to bookkeeping, and we have what we call a specialty focus. So we have specialists, this team that we built that goes around and problem solves sand, melt, and all this stuff. So we have these two teams supporting, but inside the plant, there's nobody. It's plant manager and production. And so we don't want somebody who's theorizing and coming up with ideas. On a small scale, we do experimentation with running the plant, but not at that level. So I don't think I look to replicate myself in the plant.
Yeah, I would agree. So we have a leadership team that sits over the entire organization. And although there's similarities in things that many of them have to myself, none of them are what I would say, like if I went out and tried to replicate myself, which is excellent, because if we did, everybody that worked there would go insane, because we would all be constantly tinkering and doing different things to try to improve the business, as opposed to being an expert in our field and just really driving forward. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing for kind of anybody sitting in those leadership roles throughout your organization is that you're all focused on the same end goal. Hopefully you've got a group of people that are all going to think about it differently so that they can get you to the same place, but bring lots of different perspectives. In my opinion, the person who's operating across the entire thing is probably very different than the person who truly leads marketing. That person's probably a hell of a lot more creative than I am. Or the person who needs to do HR, who's going to have a lot more empathy than I probably have, and so on down the line. So definitely different, but also making sure that they're aligned and striving towards whatever that outcome is that you want to achieve in the next 1 year, 3 years.
When we were preparing for this talk, something that was interesting to me, because it's the opposite of how I think about it, which is, why you're going to be a great fit in my company, is I have this bloat then optimize mentality. Like, hey, let's go do a bunch of deals. We're all deal junkies in the room, and then once we do that, we'll figure it out. We'll get leaner, or whatever we have to do. But you guys took the opposite approach, which was, I think the exact phrase was start now. Can we dive into that a little bit more?
Yeah, you want to start because you had some good thoughts there.
So our organization started really 6 years ago, and it grew fairly quickly over the first several years. We went from, 2 to 4 to 8, and then it blew up in 2020 and grew a lot, and it's grown a little bit, and now we're kind of back on a trajectory to see some growth. And so that meant we went from, 4 employees to 10 employees, so on and so forth, right? And I look back now, and all I can think is somebody should have told me, start now. Whether that's the system you're going to run your business on, right? What is the operating system? What is the ethos of what you do on a day-to-day basis? How do you run meetings? How do you document things? How do you create culture? All of that stuff. or it was how do you handle hiring and firing and all of that. It's all the kind of crazy stuff that when you're growing a business from $1 million to 3 million to 5 to 10, whatever, you're like, yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. My big thing as I look back now is it will never be easier to do than today. Tomorrow, the business will be more complicated than it was today if you're trying to grow the business and the business is actually growing. And if it's not growing, it's probably because you're not doing those things. And so all of that gives me this mindset of my team would tell you, like, with some of the stuff that we've tried to do over the last 2 years, it feels a lot more like turning a Titanic than turning the sailboat. I stole that from John, or well, technically John. I stole it from Brandon. So
Brandon tells me to stop turning the yacht.
The yacht.
Yeah,
there we
like
go.
a
Yes.
sailboat, right?
We just have a really big yacht, apparently. But as the organization gets so big and you've got so many different things going on and you've got different people, and those people come in and they experience the norms and all that kind of stuff, it's just more and more and more difficult to change that. And so start now is kind of the thesis of whatever those things are that are going to help you to get to that place, do it now because it will be easier today and it will make you go farther faster.
Yeah, what he said. I helped my father grow a small business and learned a lot from making a lot of mistakes. And that was one of the major things that we realized was you feel like, oh, this is what you do at a 10 million, or this is what you do at 20 million. When we get there, we'll do it. And there's like this thing that it is like there's some magical point at which this will be the right thing to do and it'll be easy. And what you realize is the right time was always yesterday, because the bigger you get, the more people you have, the more, bigger your customers are, the more time constraints you have. It gets harder and harder and harder. And so we have a saying, we don't sail at CoConf. So we say we're building a 20-year company. We're building it today. So constantly in our meetings, we are saying, is this what the 20-year company is going to do? And it gets down to the little stuff. We got quality issues coming in. How are we going to take these quality issues, document them, and get them to the right people on the floor so that they can adjust, pour, melt, sand? Like, how does it go from customer email to whatever? And we'll have a guy say, oh yeah, I can just go tell I can go tell Frank and you can change it. Okay, yeah, but our 20-year company can't be you talking to me and then walking on the floor talking to Frank. It's got to be a system where basically there's a queue of issues and he checks that a couple times a week and he knows to disperse that information. Let's set that up now, like whether it's Trello or whether it's in the ERP somewhere. Let's set that up now. So, we constantly say, what's the 20-year company? We have sketched out the 20-year company. Reg and I were just looking at a document that is this growing document of this is how our 20-year company, $100 million company operates. Here's the tools it uses. Here's how the financials work. Here's how the quality works. Here's how customer service works. Here's where people are located. And we're constantly adjusting that. But that is our driving document when I say that we're looking far out and we know what we're building. And we're trying to start everything on that page as quickly and as soon as possible and get people in the mindset of, hey, don't think of it like we're small. A lot of small businesses stay small because they think small, not just in, they want to grow, they want more sales, but they think small in how they actually try to execute the business day to day. You need to think not corporate, you need to think bigger. You need to think, how does this work when we grow? And so the questions that I love to ask are, one, what's the 20-year company look like? And then the other one that I ask a lot is, will this work if we 10x? So we're talking about quality. What if we have 10x the quality issues? What if we have 10x the people? Is this kind of meeting going to work? Is the information going to get dispersed right? What happens if we have 10x the customers? What happens if we have 10x the production? Just constantly ask yourself as you're building systems and processes and thinking about how you do things, will this work if it's 10x the shipments going out the door? And you'll find that question usually shows you about 3 to 4 breakage points ASAP. Like if we're shipping 10x the product, we don't have the space. We don't have a computer near the shipping area because Brad has to go in his office every time. Like all of a sudden, all this stuff just pops up and you're like, oh, we need to start building, fixing, working on that because our 20-year company, our $100 million vision cannot support the way that we're doing it will not support that company.
So Josh you said something interesting there, and then we were part of a conversation last night that made me think, and I just thought of this because I've heard it so many times over the last decade, right? Where people talk about the company like, okay, when we're a $10 million company, when we're a $20 million. Literally last night, I overheard 2 conversations where it's like, yeah, you do that when you're an X million dollar company, wherever you are, Chase.
Both those conversations were me, probably.
Really taking a step back when you hear something like that and thinking to yourself, like, why do I think I need to do this thing? And is it going to improve my company today? What is the ROI on this? What does it change? How does it move us forward? How does it get us to that path? As opposed to letting somebody throw out some number that's like, well, yeah, we do that when we're this size. Or that's things that $50 million companies do. And two $25 million companies or whatever it might be could be completely different. An ERP system might be the only way forward for one of those companies. And the other one, it could be an absolute disaster, right? There's $50 million companies that work really, really well on QuickBooks. That's the process that works for that business. There's other ones that absolutely could not exist without having all those other systems in place. And so just really getting clear about what is it for you and your business and doing it at the time that's right for you as opposed to some predisposed notion in your head of when that's the right time based on a dollar value that you may or may not ever get to.
So starting now, what are you guys working on?
That's the list is very long. We are working on ERP. So we're implementing one across the plants, and in like fashion, what we thought about are there's about 10 businesses that are not they're not foundry or manufacturing related that we're going to be building or buying. We thought about what is the ERP that can support those kind of like service businesses, talking about like vertical integration type stuff, and support our e-com that we got with one of our plants, plus support our plants day to day. What has that level of customizability and whatever? So we found we're going with Acumatica, is what we decided. It gave us the flexibility and the control that we need. So that's a big one right now. And then right now we're really focused on systems. I know it's a general term. So when I say that is we're dealing with guys that are just, flying by the seat of their pants, which means massive variability in everything. There's already enough variability in the environment, in the plant itself, just due to equipment and all that. So we want to try and lower that variability as much as possible. So hey, we're going to meet once a week. And we're going to talk about problems. We're not just going to fire texts off with problems all day. So we're trying to get people to be more systematic in how they approach their job, the foundry, and so that has this whole feedback loop of you be systematic. I will then give you numbers back so you know if it's working or not. So I'll give you feedback or accountability. And so we're basically it's been mindset change since day one at Canecast is really what we've been working on. And mindset in ROI and mindset on how we approach work, on how we approach problems. And so a large part of that is giving them the core system, which is ERP, to be able to build around, build their dashboard based off of, get information, instead of, this file is in Dropbox syncing over here, and this file's on Airtable, and this one's up on the screen. So it's hard to ask them to be systematic when I haven't given them the tools to be systematic. And so all that together is kind of what we're really driving forward right now at Canecast.
I'm fortunate. I'm probably in a place where I'm trying to execute some of the new stuff that Kelsey wants to bring. My leadership team is probably more in the process of doing a lot. My ops manager is basically redoing our entire 60,000 square foot warehouse. Her team's going to touch every single SKU in that warehouse over the next 3 months or 4 months or something like that to rearrange it to actually operate like a 3PL. We rolled out our ERP times 6 because 6 companies and the ERP we chose didn't support multi-company at the time, but they do now. And so we're going to do it again. We're going to go backwards, 6 to 1. Her and counterpart and supply chain and stuff are working through that. We are building a new production facility so that we can take our 2 food businesses that we're probably somewhere around maybe 30% of the stuff that those 2 businesses sell, we produce. And I'm hopeful that we'll get to like 75% through that. And the gentleman who runs supply chain for us is kind of leading up, outfitting the building that we're going to buy, which will then create another HR nightmare for the HR team to go ahead and have to now staff a new facility that's 45 minutes away and everything that comes with that. And so we are working through all of those projects and hopefully on the heels of then having some acquisitions to look at late this year. And get back into that side of doing things.
How long does it take each of your teams right now to digest a deal? Gets thrown over the wall, you're integrated.
I don't have an answer for that. I'll tell you where we're at in that process. We are creating what we're calling templates. So this is nothing new or revolutionary, but we're figuring out what is our transition template? For us, that means, so I'll get really into the weeds here for a second. For those of you that don't know, we run CaneCast, which is a foundry. We're making aluminum parts. We use green sand to do that, which basically means think of going to the beach and building something in sand and then pouring metal into it, knocking the sand off. Boom, you got a metal part. We know that there are a lot of problems. We know where most of those problems are going to happen in any plant. And so Reg is buying turnarounds for the most part, which means that there are a lot of problems. We know that going in. We need to fix the metal. We need to fix the sand. We need to fix the machines. And we need to fix the processes. And so we want a template to go in and basically measure a foundry's processes to what we know they could be, should be. And we know that our way of doing it, we can get more molds out the door. We can double, triple, or quadruple the amount of production without even hiring more people or getting new machines. That's a whole nother growth aspect. We call that our growth template. And so right now, what we're doing is talking to a lot of experts, both that are from companies that we've already acquired, the people in the industry that we've met. And it's a very open industry. It's very small, very tight knit. So getting people to help you is very easy. Getting answers is very hard because it's a science that is not like you don't just pour metal and it's done. There's temperature variation. There's how you clean the metal. There's all these different variable inputs that change and can totally ruin a part. So for us, we want to get to a 3-month turnaround where basically we know before we go in, we have our template. We know here's the 7 things that every molder needs to have. They need to have a sifter. It needs to be a number 4 mesh. It needs to come from this company. We know that they need to have a perfectly straight pull off on the machine. We have our template that we go down and we know, okay, out of the 50 things that we think makes the ideal molding setup, this company is only running 7 of those. So now we've got our work cut out for us, right? We've got 43 things to implement. So we're building those templates. Right now, we're literally making it up I'm making it up as I go along because these guys have been molding for a long time. I've been on our Ohio site for quite a while. And basically going through with them, asking them a lot of questions. The guys are really helpful, but figuring out what do you need, what don't you have, and it's not as easy as asking that because these guys are not thinking big picture. We're going to idealize the plant. They're thinking nobody has bought me supplies in 2 years. The owner has not invested in this company in a decade. He's been just sucking cash out. So their mind is so just constrained. So when you say, hey, what makes the ideal setup for you that's going to help you get more done, not hurt as much, your back's going to be easier? They're like, if you got me a shovel, that would be great. And it's like, we'll get you the shovel. I'll go get it at lunch. But I mean, like, what are the tools that ideally we should be having here? And same thing with part repair. So a welding station, same thing with pattern repair. Like every shop should have these. So we're creating these templates so that we can go in. And 2 things. In due diligence, it's going to help us be able to know how far off these plants are so that they think about basically being able to estimate your upside. Oh, they've only got 7, a lot of upside. They're already doing, 45 of our 50 things. So there's not as much upside. We can kind of gauge our multiple on that. We can gauge how much we're going to pay because we know we can back into the upside. But then also on the flip side, we've got a plan when we go in. We know, okay, sand, our sand guy is this guy. We call Christian in. We tell him to do the usual. We call the furnace guy in, Jason. He comes in and does his thing. We just go down our list, and we can hopefully have the thing turned around in 3 months. I came in the middle of turnaround in Missouri and have been handling the turnaround in Ohio. And what I will tell you is that is the easy part, what I just told you. The hardest part in our industry is mindset change. I know I keep saying that, but you got guys that have been producing at a certain speed and not really thinking about it, almost like hobby shop style. They're just in there kind of tinkering, making parts, and you got to change that mindset of like, we are a production facility that is putting out the same part consistently over and over and over, and that mindset change takes time. It takes showing them that it can be done. It takes bringing people to our Ermac plant, which is kind of our highest producing plant. That's the one that Reg spent about 4 years turning around and kind of lighting on fire. And so yeah, I think the mindset change takes longer than 3 months, but the turnaround template is, I think, about 3 months or less.
So we do a not great job today. I think we've got a really good picture of what we want it to look like, but historically, we've always found something where like, all right, we've got this great plan, we're going to go into it, we're going to integrate this company, and then we fumble something, or multiple things. It is once upon a time we thought like, okay, there's a template for this, right? But unfortunately, like every business we buy is going to be different, right? So like we buy this business and the website's on WooCommerce, which is a platform, right? Well, we run all of our businesses on Shopify. Kelsey, when he's not worried about big picture and stuff, really likes to talk about marketing, and we need the website to be on Shopify. Why? Well, because it needs to be on Shopify. And like go on down the list of all those things, right? They're going to have their own platform for distribution. They may or may not be doing manufacturing. Their team may or may not exist in a way that we're going to bring it over, right? Like if you're running a $3 million e-commerce business, you quite frankly could do it with like a general workforce of people doing distribution for you, kind of the pick, pack, ship process, or you might already have that outsourced. And then it's you or you and your spouse or whatever that's running the business. And so there's no team that's even coming with it, right? And so it's what do we need to know that we don't know that you're not telling us so that we can make sure that we can go ahead and do this appropriately. And so as we look out into the future of doing these things, we're trying to make a better effort of doing it through the functional experts on the team, right? So as opposed to Kelsey and I being the only people who review the financials, our finance team reviewing the financials, as opposed to my opinion on whether or not the suppliers and the vendors and all that kind of thing is actually useful, or the SKU breakdown and the makeup of how that's going to affect our warehouse and our operations team. Whether or not we can bring in and just basically own the customer service, or we need to expand that team, or we need to bring parts of their team all over. Like every one of those questions basically gets asked and it gets answered differently with every deal that we do. And so today we've rehomed everything to Akron, Ohio. There's two that were incredibly painful because of that. I would say by all accounts, integration maybe took 12 months for one of them. That brand had like 7,000 SKUs. It took 16 semi-trucks, 8 people on my team a week in Wisconsin to go ahead and dig out of. And then we did one where like, I think we sent somebody to Chicago to pick up a van full of knives, like literally a minivan, right? Like, and he drove it home. This is his first day of work. He's employee number 1. And so like, that's been the spectrum. But then like, the complicated side of like we buy a business and then you really get into it and you're like, well, we said we weren't going to move the manufacturing. We were going to leave it in this other place. But once you learn the better inner workings of the business, you look at it and you realize, well, we could basically rehome $500,000 in profit by just bringing this to this place. Then all of a sudden now post integration, you're doing another integration. And so for us, it's kind of deal by deal. And as much as we've wanted to be able to template it so that it has fewer hiccups and is easier for our team, it's just kind of difficult.
I think the difference there is really important, especially for everybody in this room, that, you know, and you can word them differently, HoldCo versus roll-up, and we've talked about this, where, you know, John, why do you want to own all these different businesses? And you say, because I can get cross-customer pollination, I can build, you know, a bigger list that I can get in cross-sell. So there's benefits, but there's also the chaos of a different business. Could be 2 months, could be 12 months. Where with us, again, we can't really cross-sell, so we lose that benefit. But our benefit is we get better and better every time. So we're like getting more and more narrow, more and more precision. And yeah, I don't think either one is right. I think it's what you're comfortable with, like the chaos that you can handle. And for us, we like getting better and better. Our goal is to know more about this space domestically than anybody else. We're not there, but we know that, and every month we're working on getting to know the best people in the industry. We're going where they are. We're talking to them. We're asking them questions. We're constantly looking for the brightest minds just to put in our network. So like that's a big part of like what Reg does. So we make jokes about, you know, Reg flying everywhere and golfing, but what he's doing is he's meeting a guy who builds automated machines down in Texas, and he's getting to know them and what they do and how they do it. And this industry is small. You can get to know every major player globally in our industry. And so part of the roll-up magic is that you get better and better at it, and you get it faster, and you make less mistakes, which means less risk, it means less expense, and it means higher return.
Yeah, like on that holding company side of rolling up things that like, they might be similar, they might be a little bit different in our case. We've really come around, especially over the last 12 months, to start looking at other things that I don't know that 5 years ago we would have ever said, we want that to be a competitive advantage. And so looking at our operation, looking at supply chain, customer service, HR, and making those things our competitive advantage is kind of what drives us being able to continue to bring in brands that could be completely different in terms of how they were operating before we took them over. But if we have just total excellence in doing those things over time, if we get to that place, then it makes it easier to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, those are amazing answers. My final question, then we're going to open it up for some questions. What's your single biggest challenge right now, and how are you guys thinking about it?
People.
Let's see, people.
It's fun to beat you too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does anybody need a job?
We have a joke. Do they mold? We just had one of our plant managers had a baby, literally, or is having a baby, and found out it was a girl. And I was like, Sam, this is not going to help us get more molders. We really need you to work on this. But yeah, people is our biggest thing. Yeah, that's all we think about. We are recruiting from anywhere and everywhere. I think what we're trying to do is build a company that people want to work at. And so we have a different workforce, a different pool that we're pulling from, and we know this going in. Our workforce is people that, to be honest, society has given up on a lot of them. So we think of it not only as a job, not only as production, but as a chance for them to get out of whatever holes they're in. That could be crime, that could be financial. And so a big part of what we're doing, and we have not implemented all of it yet, so we're literally doing this now, is first financial. So support yourself. We give everybody in the plant has incentive, and it's not just a profit share that gets put out. It's literally tied to what they do. It's different across the board, but our goal is that when we buy a plant, the money goes back to that plant in two ways. It goes to the people and it goes to the equipment. They appreciate that because they've been working with the bad equipment, which makes their job high friction, high stress. So when we say we're going to make your job better by getting you better equipment, and we're going to, as this plant does better, you're going to directly see it week to week in your paycheck, varying by how well we do. They appreciate that. The second thing is education. And so when I say that, I mean, we're going to help them get better at their job. We're also going to help them get better at life. And not everybody wants a part of that, and that's fine. Some people want to come in, do their thing, and get out, and that's fine. But we're building a program where they can get better at problem solving. And this is not just for foundries. This is general problem solving, general decision making. And so all of this to say, I just had this discussion with one of my managers who's got a high turnover, higher than any other plant. And I said, hey, what are you doing to make them not leave? Stop saying, oh, the workforce keeps leaving and it's horrible. You're not getting to know them. You're not giving them any reason. And I flat out told them, I go, if I worked for you, I also would walk out at lunch and not come back. And I go, you haven't done anything to engage. They just want to be part of a community. They want to be part of what we're doing, and you have not shared anything with them. And so I think creating that culture where, listen, they're not going to be high-paying jobs all the time. They're not going to be, we're a dirty industry, with sand and all over the place. So it can still be somewhere where you want to work, though. I love going into the plant. I miss when I'm not in the plant because these are great guys doing great things. Like I have a ball with them when I'm there. So we need to just to share with everybody. Don't just think about labor as a number. Don't think about it as an Excel file where you're pushing up labor so you can get more sales out the door. Think of it as what is the culture that you're building. And culture is such a buzzword, but for real, like why would people want to work with you? It doesn't have to be money. Again, to go back to what I said earlier, we a lot of times think everybody wants what we want. Like I want incentive. I want to go more, but not everybody wants that. Some people just want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want community. Some people just want something where they can work with their hands and have product at the end of the day that they built. It's self-satisfying. And so we're trying to create a place where, yeah, maybe we're not always the highest paying. I think right now we often are, but they can come in and they are happy to be part of what we're doing. And so, yeah, people's the biggest problem, and that's how we're trying to solve it. And I think it's working. We have seen turnover go way down in 3, not that 4th plant, but in 3 plants. And I think it's directly related to everything from having days where we just get pizza and beer and hang out with the guys in the shop and shut down 2 days early or 2 hours early, and to getting involved in their personal lives, asking them how they're doing. We've got our guy director of operations who is a very personable individual, and he will literally go, pick people up at the police station if he needs to. Like he's there for him 100%, and that matters to these guys because nobody else is there for him sometimes. So.
Yeah, so people. We actually have two kind of parent organizations. So we have 365 Holdings, which is what Kelsey talks about on the internet a lot. And then we have 365 Fulfillment Services, which is our distribution, production, manufacturing piece. And if I'm being honest, we've done really well to an extent on one. Culture is a buzzword, but it's also super important. We probably didn't do so well on the culture side a couple of years ago when we went through kind of our first round of turnover as an organization, right? It was a kind of a painful 6-month period where we learned a lot about ourselves, learned a lot about what we needed to change, what we needed to improve, and came out the other side with trainings and better communication, better transparency, giving every staff member better opportunity to spend time one-on-one with their direct reports, with leadership, with people that can make sure that their problems are heard, make sure that they're understood, make sure that we can actually take action against them. I think just yesterday or Friday, we celebrated our first ever 5-year employee. We called it Chris Day, and they had a blast. I felt really bad because I wasn't there, which was a shitty thing to do, but had a lot going on. But they had streamers, and I think he wore a crown, and they had a piñata, and like all kinds of stuff, right? Like, and so like, without calling it culture, like that is the culture, right? Like, can you go to work and have a good time? And so we've tried to transform that to a great extent, right? Like we have a hybrid work policy, right? Like we don't really have a whole lot. I don't even know if we have any right now employees that are outside of like the Akron, Canton, Cleveland metro area. And I've always said like, the world isn't going remote. Your employees either want to or don't want to come to work. And that's based on the type of work environment that you've created, right? And if you create a great work environment and you hire people locally, then they want to come to work because they want to see the people that they work with. They want to experience the things that you guys are doing, and you can't replace that on a screen. I don't care what anyone tells me. You can't. But that's on the owner. That's on what you want to create, right? If you want to create something else, you can. But if you want to create that environment where people still want to do the thing that they've done for the last 100 years, it can still exist. You just have to put in the work. And so we've done that for Holdings to an extent. And we've still got a lot of work to do, but we've come a long way. And we've got a lot of work to do on the other side. We're in the process right now. Like I said, we're going to kind of split our production, manufacturing, and then distribution staff. And that's going to make it harder, quite frankly. We're going to have 2 places that we need to go ahead and do this for. And we need to do a better job of some of those ideas of like really taking a better personal interest in some of those folks who they're showing up for a job, and it's different than the person who's showing up to run digital marketing, right? They're showing up for the job that maybe nobody else has ever taken an interest in what they want to do next. And we need to do a better job there because quite frankly, in our business, like that's the bottom of the funnel, that like they just consistently get everything pushed down on them. And if there were mistakes made further up the chain, they're the ones that are left to deal with it. And so we need better systems, better processes and things in place to help to support them. And so that's an initiative that probably has gotten pushed off too far into the future, but we continue to try to bring forward to the present.
Yeah, those were great answers. We have a couple minutes here to open it up for questions. We have one all the way in the back. What do we got? Okay, so those were 2 very different things. I'm going to repeat it back, though. So it was, how do you and your counterpart handle fierce disagreements? And how do you handle the budgeting and planning process?
Yeah, I'll start. Reg has a saying that he talks about, you're never going to like all of somebody. There's always going to be, 5 to 20%, probably more when he's looking at me, but that you just don't like. It's just not your thing, right? And the goal, and this is partnership, this is in life, this is friends, this is marriage, is you focus on the stuff you do like, all right? Reg is incredibly intelligent. Reg is building something that's amazing. That's why I wanted to join up with it. And so when there's fierce disagreements, you just got to remember, if you're in a good partnership, you don't need to remind yourself, it's always there. We're trying to build the same thing. We're trying to go the same direction. To date, I have never had an issue where I felt like Reg was attacking me personally. He has called my ideas stupid. He said I'm looking at things wrong. He's told me to shut up. He's told me to get out. Like, all that happens. But none of it is me. It's all like, we need to build this company and you're not looking at it right. And vice versa. I've called him and, hey, listen, that's not the right move here. We joke around, visionary integrator. you talk to the visionary, they're going to fire everybody every week and they're just going to rehire and they're going to buy all the new equipment. And it's like, yeah, that's great. I'm going to go back and like actually make sure everybody stays employed and we get parts out the door. So you have to understand that. I don't expect Reg to talk to me at my level. And I don't mean, higher or lower. I just mean he doesn't look at the business the way I do. That's why I'm here. And I don't expect him to. I don't want him to. I want him to come in, break stuff, make a bunch of wild claims, make my mind work differently, and then back out. And so there are fierce disagreements, but they're not personal. So you lay your ego down. And luckily, Reg and I so far have not had a problem where ego came into it, that took it personally. Because again, I'm going to circle back. We're literally both trying to build the same thing. And I think a huge part of the relationship working correctly and avoiding those fierce battles is dreaming together. And so a lot of times we're like, we get bucketed, and I'm a little bit of an EOS basher. So you guys can throw me out after. Yeah, man. Love you, Peter. But because the second you add that label, all of a sudden it's like, no, dreaming's not my job. I'm not the visionary. Reg is, right? And all of a sudden you absolve yourself of thinking that way. And it's nice to be able to dream with Reg and talk about what we could do. And then, like I said, I leave the conversation and I do something very different than what Reg does. Reg looks for a company to buy. I go figure out how to build the systems that make that happen. And so, but when you dream together, it's really hard to also have a fierce battle because you're constantly reminded, we're trying to build the same amazing thing. We're trying to build this really cool company. We're trying to change people's lives. Oh yeah, my idea is stupid. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Like, let's come up with a new one. So I think dreaming together is a huge piece of it.
Like, it goes back to the beginning of this conversation. Like, if you have trust and you have a terrific marriage, every one of those conversations, no matter how fierce, heated, whatever they might get, the only reason it's occurring is because you both care so damn much. Like, you both want the exact same thing, and you know that at all times if you're truly aligned in that way. And so, like, that back and forth, like for Kelsey and I think there's probably been hundreds of times over the last decade where we went back and forth, and maybe it was in a day, maybe it was in an hour, maybe it was in a week, whatever it was. But we got to an outcome that was a combination of what both of us thought was a good answer, a good way of going about whatever we were trying to solve for. And we both kind of looked at it and said, yeah, that wouldn't have worked out so well if we did your idea or my idea, but this path that got us to where we're at, that works.
All right, so the question was the worst or hardest part about joining the organization when you did?
Yeah, so Kelsey and I just started it together. I don't know that we knew what we were going to do necessarily. This was like 11 or 12 years ago or something. And so for us, it was both an exit from getting to do what we didn't love doing and an opportunity to go figure out what we love doing. So, like, I don't have a great story of like having to be integrated into what was already happening. It just has kind of always been my career post the only other thing I ever did.
For me, it was catching up. It was learning. So the foundry industry has a lot of science. Reg is an engineer, so he came in with a lot of foundational knowledge on how stuff works, how it's supposed to work, how metal works, right? I do not have that background. I'm business. I'm an ex-finance guy. I took some physics courses that's about it. So for me, it was learning, so there's Chesterton's fence, right? Don't remove things until you know why they're there. Otherwise, you're going to have unintended consequences. There was a lot of things that looked broken in the foundry space when I got there. Like, oh, we wouldn't run it this way. I had spent 10 years building this other company, optimizing systems. And to me, a lot of stuff looked broken, but I also knew I didn't get the space. And so what I did was I went up and lived with Reg for a while. We just talked nonstop about, and when I mean we, it was him, talking nonstop about the foundry, about metal, about science, visiting the plants. He drove me to suppliers. He drove me everywhere. And it was like we had we drove down to Missouri together, just 13 hours of just, here's why we're doing it this way. Here's how I think about it. And then I started staying at all the plants. For about 2 months straight, was not home with my family. I was literally just staying on site at the plants, getting to know the people, the machines. And I do not feel like I could make any changes until I understood why things were done the way they were, what was broken and what was not. And so that was pretty intense. It was basically on site during the day. At night, I would go home. Literally, I still do. I was reading the furnace manual. I was reading white papers on or scientific papers on how this stuff actually works, trying to become an expert as quickly as possible. So I think that the science part of it was the hardest part for me to get in the middle of.
Reg's question was for the visionaries in the room, what would they say that we need to do better from their side of the table?
I don't
Nothing.
have a clear answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, so like our organization took the first 6 months this year, and I basically asked Kelsey, like, could you please throttle the amount of grenades you're throwing over the wall? We need to build better infrastructure so that we can grow the business the way that we both want to grow the business. And so he did a conference instead. Worked out. But like 6 months into July 1st, we have a production facility building that he helped to negotiate the deal for that is under LOI, 2 different financing deals, and there's 2 different businesses that we're looking at. It's been 24 days. And so like, I don't know that I would really change anything other than like, do be able to understand when you have put so much pressure on the organization in such a short period of time that like, you do have to be able to at least allow the other person to use the brake pedal that you don't actually, you like ripped it out of the car.
Yeah. Reg constantly says and acts by, it's your call, not mine. So I hold both the gas and the brake, which is nice. So, for example, right now he would like me to make some decisions. He's pushing me on some decisions, but he also is like, hey, it's your call at the end of the day. I just want you to at least look into these 3 things. Here's what I want you to do. But if you don't do them, it's your call. And there's also not, and this is key, there's not and I'm going to rub it in your face later when it doesn't work out, or if it would have worked out. There is hey, it's your call. We're all going to make mistakes. He gave me something to do in December. I didn't do it for 4 months. It blew up in my face. Not once was it like you're an idiot. It was just, I did tell you, and you can still fix it if you do this. And so I went and did what he told me, and it fixed a bunch of personnel issues that we had. But there was never a guilt, or it was just like, hey, we're both figuring this thing out and being forgiving. So, yeah, I think I keep saying the same thing. No, as a visionary, I don't think you should hold the execution. I think if the visionary has the keys to the gas, it's dangerous. I think you need to find somebody that you trust to hold that power.